Hello, I'm Jamie with Stonemaier Games, and today I'm joined by two special guests. Stonemaier ambassadors Logan and Mike are joining us today to talk about filler and short games. So before I jump into my honorable mentions and ambassador picks, why don't we go with Michael and then Logan. Let us know your honorable mentions and why you selected this category as being special to you and that you wanted to talk about it. So Michael, why don't you go ahead?
Morning, y'all. Thank you, Jamie, for having me. I'm really excited about doing this. I was telling Logan during the intro that I sort of identify myself as a heavy gamer, but while making this list, I found out that I've got a very deep bench of filler and shorter games that are really interesting to me and that I find compelling. So, with that in mind, my two honorable mentions were Bandito and Kobayakawa, the latter of which really could be a stand-in for just about anything in the Oink Games catalog, whether it be startups or, a fake artist goes to New York or Scout or whatever. But there you go.
Great. What about you, Logan?
Yeah, similarly, filler games often end up being the main event for me. You have a long day and your brain's already kind of melting out your ears, and so these are often what I go to. Honorable mentions in no particular order: Claim, Curious Cargo, Acropolis, and Star Realms. I'd say my two more special honorable mentions would be Cartographers and Spectral, would be two that I really particularly enjoy.
Awesome. Thank you all for sharing those picks. We'll go more into detail in our top three. And I do want to say, before we jump any deeper into it, we might have slightly different definitions of short or filler games. But for me, I looked at games that I could set up, play, and clean up in around 20 minutes. Maybe that's plus or 5-10 minutes. But that's about the range that I was looking for. And I particularly like them because they really do. The word filler, I think, might get a bad rap sometimes, but for me, it's a nice. It fills a slot at game night. If I'm looking to play a longer game, maybe I'm waiting for people to arrive. We can play a filler game early on. If we have two groups playing and one group finishes before the other, we can slip in a filler game. And at the end of the night, we can all get together for a filler game or a shorter game. So I really like the niche that it fills. Ambassadors had a lot of picks to select for filler and short games. The top two selected were Love Letter and Scout. A lot of ambassadors picked those too. But they also mentioned Six Nimmt, Blob Party, Boop, Cabanga, Codenames, Coloretto, The Crew, Fantasy Realms, Faraway, That's Not a Hat, For Sale, Coup, Hanabi, Just One, Knarr, Letterpool, Mind Up, The Next Station Series, No Thanks, Patchwork, Rolling Realms, Sea Salt and Paper. I'm almost done. Only like 10 more. Sequoia, Skull King, So Clover, Spicy, Spots, Star Realms, Super Mega Lucky Box, Sushi Go, The Mind, Things in Rings, Trio/Nana, it's the same game, and Wandering Towers. And I've talked enough in a row here, so why don't I do my honorable mentions in a second. Michael, why don't we go over to you and talk about your number 3 pick for a few minutes?
Cool. Yeah, that's a pretty substantial list.
Yeah.
So my number 3 was Pyramix, which I understand is not necessarily one that gets talked about a lot among hobby gamers, but it's got a really great toy factor. You start off with basically a big pyramid of cubes in this plastic base. And really, if there was any game that got sent out with a Lazy Susan, this should have been it, because you want to be like viewing it from all the different angles to see what pieces are available for you to take, because you need like a certain amount of a piece visible to be able to pull it off of the pyramid. And then you're trying to collect Ankhs, birds, and Eyes of Horus. Those are the 3 different symbols in each of 4 different colors, and gain majority in those, and each one of them scores in a slightly different way. So it causes a little bit of like tension in your decision making. Do I go for the eyes, which are the most points? Do I go for the Ankhs, which will give me some benefit right at the end of the game? Or some combination of the two. And it's really fun to look at. It's really satisfying to pull out those chunky cubes and allow the others to sort of filter down into place. And it's a good combination of thinky and like really easy to explain and enjoyable to play.
Logan, have you played this one? This one's off my radar.
I've never heard of it before. I'm very interested in checking it out, though. It looks like a lot of fun.
Yeah, visually, it looks like it has a great table presence. Reminds me maybe slightly visually of Dice Miner, which I love. So that's already a hook for me to try this one.
That's what I heard when I was telling people that this was going to be on my list. So yeah.
Awesome. So Pyramix is your number 3, one that I'll definitely have to try out. Thank you for bringing that one up, Mike. Logan, what about you? What is your number 3?
Yeah, so for my number 3, I chose Vlada Watil's Galaxy Trucker. It's one of my personal favorites. Plays great with 2 to 4 players. And really, the premise of the game is you start off drafting. It's kind of a free-for-all tile draft, trying to build a spaceship out of sewer parts. And if you read the flavor text in the game manual, it especially makes it fun. You're cobbling this piece of junk together, and then you're going to go out on a journey. And I think that the game really embodies that well. That you build this precious junk spaceship, and then you're going to set out on a journey where you're going to face space pirates and try to pick up valuable cargo along the way. You're just a trucker after all, just trying to make a living. And all these perils you're going to face, you have to try to fit together on this tiny little spaceship board as you're quickly racing other players to build your ship. It's just a lot of fun. It goes quickly, and it's often amusing. You either win, victoriously, and you're so proud of the ship you've built and all the things you accomplished with it, or inevitably, occasionally, you get blasted by space pirates. They blow off one final little thing of your ship that knocks half your ship off, and it's very fun and lighthearted. Always a great play. Have a lot of fun with it.
I've seen the game played a long time ago, and it's been a while, but is it almost entirely simultaneous? Like you're drafting simultaneous, building, and having these events happen simultaneously?
It is. And actually, I think all the games I've selected mostly are simultaneous play, and that's what you get a lot of satisfying gameplay in a shorter period of time because of that.
That's a great point. Mike, have you played this one?
Yeah, so I did a demo of the newest version a couple of years back, and yeah, I mean, it's fun trying to like map out those routes of the pipes. And also, I know this one gets kind of a bad rap sometimes of having the events just happen at you, but it's really just more of an extended scoring that I think is hilariously chaotic.
That's a neat way to put it.
It is. That's a great description.
Yeah. Awesome. So at number 3, we have Galaxy Trucker for Logan, Pyramix for Mike, and I'll get to my number 3 in a second. Let me do my honorable mentions real quick since I skipped that before. I have a couple different categories of these that I'll go over briefly. Honorable mentions overall: For Sale, Fantasy Realms, Ink and Gold, Just One, Blob Party, and Sunday Split. And then I also had a category for Board Game Arena. I do play board games every other week on Board Game Arena, and there are games that I normally wouldn't probably call filler games because they would take too long, but on Board Game Arena, they're really, really fast. And so a few of those games, and a few of these are just games that I play on Board Game Arena that are fillers in the tabletop too, are Draftosaurus, Seven Wonders, that one in particular, not a filler game on the tabletop, definitely a filler game on Board Game Arena. Captain Flip recently, Abandon All Artichokes, Super Mega Lucky Box, Can't Stop, Samillo, Vegetable Stock, and Faraway. And then I have a 2-player category too: Boop, Hierarchy, Smitten, and Patchwork. And if any of those trigger some ideas for you two for 2-player or Board Game Arena specific, we'll come back to that at the end of the video. So feel free to think about that. My number 3 is Bag of Chips. This is a fairly recent discovery. My coworker Susanna exposed me to this game. This is a game about choosing the goals that you want to score from a hand of cards that you get at the beginning of the game. So you get a hand of cards, and they have goals like this one says that by the end of the game, there will be more green chips than yellow chips. This one just says score 8 points per green chip. So you have information in your hand about what your goals could be, and you're choosing whether or not to score those goals or not. That's the decision that you have round to round until you finally score at the end of the game, or at the end of the round. But what you don't have control over are which chips are actually going to be pulled out of a random bag. And so in the middle of the table here, any player each round is going to pull a specific number of chips out of the bag and show them here. I believe this was the round 1 selection. So they randomly drew 2 green, 2 red, and 1 yellow. And I think that's why this player chose to keep this goal active, because they thought, okay, by the end of the game, there might be more green chips than yellow chips, but you don't really know. So it's not a bag building game, but you're pulling things out of a bag, and I guess it feels a little bit like the casino game craps, because you don't really know what's going to be rolled, but you're all rooting for different things and you have control over your goals. I've had a great time playing this game. Have either of you played Bag of Chips?
I have not, but it's kind of given me vibes like point salad.
A little bit of point salad. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it has that aspect to it. Yeah. So yeah, this is one that, yeah, it's a neat one to play, especially since everyone's really focused on what's being pulled out of the bag and almost cheering on certain things that you want to see or don't want to see. And it plays really fast, plays in like 10 minutes. Yeah, so that is Bag of Chips is my number 3. Mike, what about your number 2?
All right. So my number 2, I unfortunately don't have with me, and that is because it's over at my partner's house, because almost invariably, if I am playing Timeline or Timeline Twist, it is with her. I am somewhat of a history history nerd. I don't want to say a history expert by any means, but I find looking at history and seeing the progression of events to be a really interesting little pastime or hobby. And so being able to see could they have driven to the battlefield during the Revolutionary War in a steam-powered automobile? And I think the putting of the items into line based on when they occurred leads to really interesting questions like that of, did they have loaves of bread during the French Revolution? Like that, those kinds of weird thoughts. Timeline Twist is the fully cooperative version that was recently released. Timeline was the competitive version. In either case, you have a sort of hand of these event cards, and you're trying to place them in line based on which occurred first in historical order. And then you flip them over. It reveals what year they occurred in, and you find out if you were right or wrong. And I just think it's a very fun way to sort of test a different part of your brain. A lot of the rest of these are logical or spatial reasoning, and this is more, memory and that kind of thing. So I really dig Timeline and Timeline Twist.
Do you find that it has good replayability, or once you learn these things about history, does it take away from the game?
So the older versions, the one that came in the tin boxes, had enough cards that I have not ever in multiple games felt like I was in the same situation trying to figure out the same progressions. The newer versions I know have cut down on the number of cards that were in them. But one of the new Timeline Twists that they put out is Star Wars. So there's always another little change variant that you can do. There's pop culture one too. So I think that there is enough content out there that I've never felt like I was just memorizing dates and events.
Okay. That's great. Well, thank you for sharing that one about Timeline and Timeline Twist. Neat that there's a cooperative and a competitive version as Mike's number 2. Logan, what about you? What's your number 2 pick for filler or short games?
Well, my number 2 was King Domino. It's one of my favorites, and obviously chose as my number 2. It's a card. It's basically a tile drafting, tile laying puzzle. During the game, you're essentially start with a wild domino in the middle, and you're going to then draft along simultaneously with the other players, different dominoes with different terrain types on them. And then for scoring, as you go, you're trying to build a orthogonally adjacent, say forest or lake or a wheat field, desert, those sorts of things. And in that orthogonally adjacent segment of terrain, you want to get as many tiles, but also as many stars as you possibly can, because at the end of the game, your scoring is a multiplier of the number of stars within that segment multiplied by the number of tiles. So if you have 3 stars and 8 tiles, you get 24 points, and you go through all of the different groupings that you have, and that would be, you'd add them together for your final score. So if you have 2 forests and one of them has all your stars, well, the forest without any of your stars will not score you any points. And so it's a very fun puzzle trying to figure out how to, anticipating what may come next, how to fit it all together in such a way that you can maximize your scoring. If you want to play more competitively, there could be a little bit of a hate drafting where you're kind of looking and trying to prevent your opponent from getting that tile that's going to really win the game for them, while still trying to balance getting the best tiles for you. So it's a lot of fun. It's one that plays well with a younger audience, one that plays great with 2 players. And the 2-player count, you can also scale up to playing a larger map as well that fills out the game, makes it take just a little bit longer, but is very satisfying.
One thing I'm loving about this pick, and really all the picks that you two have made so far, is that they have really streamlined rule sets. So not only can you set up, play, and clean up in 20-25 minutes, but you can also teach the game probably within that same time as well. So I think that's really nice for filler games when you can include the teach in that filler time span. Mike, have you played this one?
I completely agree. I love King Domino. I think it's absolutely fantastic. It's like quick and easy enough to teach, to learn, to play, that it really does fit into those very short time windows. You can bang out a game of this in 10-15 minutes. But it's also like really fun to look at. There's that one tile that's the double water that has the big dragon shadow over it. I love those little details. Yeah, it's great choice.
Yeah, my kids will occasionally pick tiles just based upon what the art is. They're like, it's the one with the dragon. I have to take it.
Well, that's great. King Domino as Logan's number 2. My number 2 is a cooperative game, The Mind. The Mind is a game where you were trying to work together with the other players to play cards in sequence without any form of communication. This is, like the other games that we've described, it's very easy to teach this game. It ramps up quickly. You each start with 1 card in hand. If you succeed, you each get 2 cards in hand, and then 3, and then so on. I've had a great time pretty much every time that I've played The Mind. It's one of these games where it feels really good to sync together with the other players and get play these cards in order, even though you're not communicating anything about the numbers on these cards. I play with a vast variety of people, heavy gamers, people who are new to gaming, and it has appealed to a broad spectrum of people. So yeah, I really love The Mind. Are you 2 familiar with this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah. One of my favorite things about it, aside from the fact that it has a very different feel to it than a lot of other games. I've got a copy of the game, and I feel perfectly comfortable playing the game or The Mind, or honestly, no thanks, with just that one set of cards. So yeah, both very space efficient and plays wildly differently from most other things that you're ever going to touch.
Yeah.
Well, one of the challenges I had playing it before is, I think, replayability. It was really fun the first 3-4 times we played it, and then we kind of, at least with the group that I was playing it with, kind of solved it, and it was like, oh, okay, we'll move on to something else. But it was fun. It was a very unique. like Michael was saying.
Well, that's a good point too. I would say I don't often play the mind with the same group or the same people, but it's one of these games that it's the hook of the game and really the simplicity of it and the syncing element is novel enough that I like showing it to other people. And so I've probably played it with a lot of different people, which is also nice for filler games, unless you're typically playing with the same group every time you play games. But yeah, that's the mind as my number. Oh, yeah, go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I just had a quick question about that, Jamie.
Mm-hmm.
Anecdotally, I have heard that there's one specific group of people who find this very easy and a sort of uninteresting because of that. And that's EMTs or other people who would be expected to perform, CPR. Have you ever experienced that?
I can see why you said that, because they're used to counting the beats for CPR. Yeah. I have not experienced that in person. I've avoided using tricks to figure out what the next card is. And maybe part of that is because I try to play with different people who don't find those tricks. That's interesting though. Mike, what about your number one?
All right. So my number one is probably the least likely to be able to be explained, learned, and played in the 20 to 30 minute time range. And that's because it's a Carl Chuddick game. So it's really weird. My number one is this very well-loved copy of Red 7. Red 7 is a simple enough game. It's just the numbers 1 to 7 in each of the 7 colors of the rainbow. So it's literally just a 49 card deck. You get dealt 7 of them at the beginning of the game and 1 card face up in front of you. And you're going to try and not get eliminated. You start off with the rule of the game being red. Red's rule is the highest card wins. So whomever has the highest card played in front of them is currently winning. And on your turn, you need to either or both of play a card in front of you or discard a card, the latter of which will change the rule that everyone's playing by. So you might change it to, most cards under 4 or most even cards. And you're trying to be very efficient with that hand of 7 cards, because it's not on your turn, draw a card and then do one of those things. It's just play a card and or discard a card. Now, the odd numbered cards have different special abilities. Most notably, the 3, if you play a 3 in front of you, lets you draw a card. So, within that really, really basic framework, the amount of choices and the sort of breadth of that decision tree on a given turn becomes really big, really fast. So even with just 49 cards, it makes you make a lot of really interesting decisions right from the get-go. And I think that's really cool.
Well, and those decisions matter immediately, right? Because if you can't be the winner at that moment, are you out of the round or out of the game? Something like that, right?
You're out of the round, yeah. And
you're
then when one person is left, they win. I often will play multiple rounds of this game, and in the rule book there is a suggestion on how to score, which is basically however many cards you have as the winner that meet the current rule. Add all of those up, and those are your points for the round. And then you play until somebody reaches 40. This is also a game that you can play a bunch of rounds of and also really get something out of it that way.
That's cool. Logan, have you played this one?
I have. I've, again, never heard of any of Michael's. These are some games that we need to go look up and try to find to play.
Feels really good to be the king of the obscure.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Yeah, I think people who follow this channel see me talk about a lot of the same games. So I love having guests like you two on to talk about games that people don't hear about as often from me. And Red 7 as your number one is definitely one of them. Logan, what about you? What is your number one filler or short game?
My number one is, I've mentioned several Ryan Courtney games in my honorable mentions, would be Trailblazers with Bitewing Games by Ryan Courtney. It's a card drafting game where you're essentially have three different types of trails. You have your kayaking, mountain biking, and hiking trails. And you're a trail builder. And so through 4 rounds of drafting, you're trying to build the longest trails that start and end at their respective trailheads. So you'll have a kayaking trailhead, a mountain biking trailhead, and a hiking trailhead. And each of those trails, there's a little bit of a push your luck. They'll all twist and wind throughout one another, but then it has to end back at its trailhead in order to score that loop. The game plays great for anywhere from 1 to 8 players. It comes with some great solo challenges to play in it. In each round, too, you'll have some challenges when you're playing multiple players that'll get you additional points as well. And when you're done, a lot of solo play, there is a draft element that definitely makes you think about, what you might get or what you might not get because of that push your luck element. But when you look down at the end of the game, it's very satisfying to see these wonderful twisting loops that loop around other trailheads and then come back home to score you those points. One of the other things I think is just so much. There's several different editions of the game, but the particular edition that I have, I can't remember the name of it right now. There's a bunch of them though, but the editions that come with the expansions for the animal expansion and have the option to have your hikers as well are particularly fun because they add other elements to the game that can add some additional challenge. On one of them, you'll only play two of the 3 routes, but then you'll have a hiker, a biker, a kayaker racing through the loops, and you're trying to build the trails ahead of them so that they don't get to the end of them. And at the end of the game, you're trying to have that loop finish back around. But if you finish it too early, then you didn't score the extra points. And so it's this real challenge in that particular one where you can only really build one loop, and it's a push your luck. But you don't want to push your luck, too far or come up too short. So it's a lot of challenge, a lot of fun. But again, very simple, very kind of puzzly game. But it plays very well with the whole player count because of the simultaneous play.
You were telling me before we started recording that you're an avid mountain biker, so I can see how the theme, especially that add-on expansion, would appeal to you for this game.
Yeah, the theme definitely resounds. But I mean, just the outdoor activities in general, I think all 3 of them resound with me to some extent. But mountain biking has a special place for me.
Mm-hmm. Mike, have you played this one?
I have not. I just looking at this, I have to imagine how much AP I would experience trying to play this. That looks very cool. It reminds me of the roads from Carcassonne or from like Isle of Skye or that kind of thing, which is always a very satisfying thing to try and like make all of those little loops work in exactly the way that you want them to.
Yeah.
And I played this game once. I really enjoyed it. And it was a good reminder to me as a designer that cards can be any shape or size. These are not regularly sized cards, but they work beautifully. They shuffle beautifully, shuffle much better than if they were tiles. And so I really appreciate that about the game. And I had a great time with it as well. So that is Trailblazers as Logan's number one. My number one is one that one of you briefly mentioned, and the ambassadors definitely mentioned. And that is No Thanks. No Thanks is to me, well, it's my number one. It's the ultimate filler game for me because it's super quick. It's I found it to be fun for a wide variety of gamers, and it scales up to I think 7 or 8 players. So it scales up to quite a few players with a very limited play time. Because on your turn, all you're doing is you have one of these cards that are face up on the table. Say it's the 34. And your choice on the turn is to either say, no thanks, you don't want that card, and you have to pay a chip from your secret stash to not take the card, or you can take the card and take all the chips that have accumulated next to it. And the point of the game is to not have points. So a 34 is 34 points. You don't want to get 34 points. 11 would be better to take, especially if you get a few chips onto it, because the chips are negative points, but in a good way. The red chips that you have, or the chips that you have, offset the points that you're gaining from the cards that you have to take. And one of the nice little hooks about the game, and really I think the game is so much better because of this, if you manage to have a sequence of cards, you only have to score the lowest of those cards. And so say I take this 34, and then later on the 33 shows up. No one else wants the 33, and so I can let some chips stack up on it as other players say no thanks. And finally, I can take that card. I only have to score the 33, and I've accumulated all these extra chips as a result. So that is a really great hook of the game, especially since you don't know exactly what cards are in the deck, because 9 cards are removed at the beginning of the game. It plays so quickly, so smoothly. I've had a great time every time I played. Mike, have you played No Thanks?
Yeah, I've played a bunch of No Thanks.
Yeah.
Big fan of it. Think it's like it causes that really good tension of when that, like you were saying, if I've already got the 34, when the 33 comes up, nobody else wants it, which means that everybody else is incentivized to keep putting out those chips so they don't have to take it. But me as the person who it most benefits, I need to decide when exactly the incentives balance that I can't push this around the table another time because there's enough chips on it. Somebody's just going to take it to get all of those. And then there's also the little bit of memory of how many chips do people actually have left? Like, if I pass this around again, is somebody going to have to take it because they can't pass? I think it's a lot of really cool decisions in a very small box.
Logan, what about you? Have you tried No Thanks?
So I've heard of it before, haven't played it. I mean, really, both of you, a lot of games that I need to give a try to.
Yeah, I think Mike summed up the nice tension in the game there really, really well as you're watching the cards go around on the table, especially a card that you've decided that you are okay with taking. It's just a matter of when do you take it. It's great tension in this game.
Mm-hmm.
So I did mention earlier, I think I probably caught you two off guard by saying that I had a board game arena list and a 2-player list. Are there any games that came to mind as we close out here that you wanted to mention for either of those categories for the filler short game category?
Other games that fit onto either the board game arena list or the 2-player list. I think Hive is absolutely brilliant, really portable, can play it anywhere where there's a horizontal surface. Anybody who has played chess, it's going to feel familiar to them. And also those big chunky pieces are really, really satisfying to just like manipulate. And I think Hive is absolutely fantastic and also plays fast enough. I live in Denver, and I've actually like played Hive at Red Rocks while I was waiting for a concert to begin. So it's really, really great for that. I mean, I am still of the opinion that Fantasy Realms plays at its absolute best at 2 players. I think that's where it makes the most interesting decisions. And it also cuts down on the one problem I have with it, which is scoring takes way too long. So the fewer players there are, the faster that process happens. But those are the only 2 that immediately come to mind.
Nice. And Logan, did you have any others that came to mind?
I think one of those for me, sorry about that too, I'm having some internet connection issues here, but Claim would be one for me that plays really quick, great filler, plays great with 2 players.
Nice. I'll have to check that one out. Well, thank you so much for talking about this. Yeah. I really appreciate Mike, Logan, taking your time to talk about these games. And anyone watching this, I'd love to hear your favorite pick of the games that we mentioned. And beyond that, what your favorite filler or short game is. Whether it's in the broad category or the board game arena specific category, 2-player category, co-op, competitive, any of those categories, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below.
And before we cut out, I just had one additional thing to say. I just want to say that now is the time for all people of conscience to make it known to the people who represent them that we should stop arming Israel, free Palestine. It's been going for 7 months that there is a genocide happening before everyone's eyes. Now is the time to pressure your politicians to make that stop.
Thanks for speaking up about that, Michael. I appreciate that. That's a powerful statement. Well, thank you, Mike. Thank you, Logan, for joining us today. And yeah, have a great weekend.
Appreciate y'all.
Take care.
Yeah.